Hello, welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe. This is number 148 for November 1st, 2023. Today we'll talk about the power of audit logging with Plantain App software. We'll talk about that and other things as well. First, let me introduce myself. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App. I'm joined today. Patrick Anderson is Technical Success Manager for Plantain App, and between us, we'll present this topic today. The Low Code Cafe is a presentation of Plantain App. We do this every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, so it's a bi-weekly community webinar. It's an opportunity for us to tell you about the updates to our system, provide some demos, but the biggest part, hands-on low coding. So we're glad that you're here and joining us today. We record all these out and put them out on YouTube, so youtube.com/plantainapp. And so there's 140, however many, 147 episodes out there already. And they're all bookmarked so that you can get to an individual topic. So you can search YouTube and find episodes and then do some playback. So hope you get some good value out of those. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk about some hotfixes in our From the Trenches of Support segment, and then we'll dive into our main topic, the hands-on low-code development. If you want to engage with us, you can use the chat window, the question and answer. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question directly. And then after it's all over with, there is a feedback form, so you can tell us what you think and what you might want to see in a future episode. The next live episode is scheduled for 2 weeks from today, November 15th. And so now we dive in from the trenches of support. I didn't change Patrick's name on that slide, but I'll still present it. Hotfixes for our current version is 1.25. We've held this version open for quite a long time. It's coming to the end, but previously, we've released 48 different hotfixes to it, and this time we're releasing 8. The main one to be aware of, the data model hotfix. This hotfix, if you're going to install anything else in this, any other of the hotfixes, you're going to want to install this one to the data model before or with all of the other hotfixes mentioned. The data model, the hotfixes that are otherwise released rely on changes that are made here in our data model. So the data model must be installed, and if you don't, you'll get, assuming you'll get an error screen. So install this one first. This data model one hotfix fixes a variety of things, some various bugs. So our read all entity action, if you were doing a where clause that included an @ sign, like you were trying to search for a particular email address, that was failing, so we fixed that. We had an issue with entities of type documents and certain things not saving, so that corrects that. You can certain times, in certain specific cases, when you're creating an entity record, it was creating it in a different context. If you're using our OpenAI connector, we have the ability now, this has the ability to, the run SQL query, if you run the run SQL query action in places like automation or APIs, this assistant lets you type in things like, hey, I want a report of all the users that were created since 2023. That assistant was duplicating certain parameters when, if it had bind parameters, it was incorrectly bothering other actions in your action stack. So that's corrected. Some changes to workflows, importing and resolving a timeout. So that's changes to our data model. And again, as always, if you need these fixes, you should install them. If you don't need them, or if you're in if you don't need them in a production environment, there's no reason to install them. But if you're waiting on them, they're available here. So for APIs, the ability to download a file, the download file action was corrected. This one is one of the ones that the listing builder, this on search, is a favorite of mine that we've resolved this. But when you have a very big set of data that's in a listing and you're searching through it, sometimes the search takes a long time to complete, and this solves that. If you were doing a search and it began a search and then you changed your mind and wanted to search for something different, sometimes the values that were shown on screen were the results of the previous search. It was confusing. So we've cleaned that up. Now, when you change your search, it cancels the last request and starts a new request. And so the information on screen, the visual, what you see is always representative of what's going on. On our training module, the training screen size wasn't showing the right size, and now it is. We've fixed in our form builder. We had an issue with date and time where you wanted to type in the date and time instead of select it on the screen. You couldn't type it in, so that's fixed. We have a feature for CNPs. This is the Romanian equivalent of a social security number, and it's doing some checking to validate CNPs. So now CNPs for people born abroad are fixed. A fix to authentication server request. Certain languages that have accent characters, so letters with an accent above them. This was a drop down with autocomplete wasn't searching well with those. You can disable accents now so that the search will work. And we've merged the server request and server request HTTP client actions. In our data model, we've improved some permissions related to entity actions and their error messaging. And we've had some odd cases where when with namespaces that you could have spaces before or after, and it was a bit confusing. So we're now trimming the namespaces so that confusion doesn't happen. And an enhancement in form builder. This is for hierarchical data sources, which is actually a feature we we've released but haven't brought to your attention yet. So that'll be a topic for a future Low Code Cafe. But we're now expanding the nodes. So a hierarchical data for checkboxes and checkbox list says that you can have parent and child nodes, and that you can expand them. And so this is automatically expanding the nodes. So this will make more sense once we've documented and brought that to your attention when you're using it. And the same issue with accents was fixed in the listings, and the filters the drop downs are wider, so you can see things that you're selecting better. So 8 different hot fixes encompassing a lot of issues, and if you were waiting on any of those, then they're there for you to install. We do another event every Friday. That's every week on Friday, this same hour, the Low Code Campfire. We encourage you to engage with us in that, to join us. Whether you sit on the sidelines or get involved in the conversation, it's a great opportunity to meet with your other people in the low code community and us, and we often answer questions and solve issues right on the spot. or as we did in an episode a few weeks ago, there was a campfire discussion of audit strategies, and that spurred this topic today. So Patrick, if you get a minute and you could put that on the chat, all these links. These are the links for the for various places. You can register for the Low Code Campfire. You can get access to our webinar recordings, which are on youtube.com/plantinap. You can get to our community portal, lots of good resources there, and you can give us feedback. So great. Hands-on low coding. We're going to talk about audit logging. So the overview, where are we going today? There's lots of different ways to track data changes. You can do it at the SQL level. You can do it directly in your code. We're picking a very easy way today to talk about where you can do it through low code using the features of our automation. But there are a variety of ways to do it, and just wanted to bring that up, that the way that we're talking about today is just one of many. We talked about them in Low Code Campfire episode 119, and that link is the one that's on the chat. So if you want to hear about other ways, I encourage you to click in on that and listen there. But we're going to focus on just the low code, the very easy way to do this. And we'll be working in the website campfire.plantinap.com. People who participate in the campfire meetings on Friday gain access to this website. So you'll be able to take a look at directly all the different work that I'm doing today. But if you're not part of Campfire, you'll be able to copy and follow along from what we're doing on screen. So today, what we're going to learn is how to create an automation job to store and access data changes. So every time you change data in a table, it's going to get stored in an audit table. So we're going to see this data, and then we're going to store it in a table. And in future episodes, we hope to provide ways that you can use the data change information that's being stored. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go hands-on here. I am working in the Campfire website, campfire.plantinap.com, and I'm going to go into our configuration page, which gives us access to the Plantinap menu, and we're going to be working in the automation area. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is explore a little bit about what's going on in automation and what you have access to. One of the things that we're going to need in this project is the trigger type, which is the why did a particular automation fire. So as a reminder, an automation job is one that is sitting, it's a set of actions that are sitting, waiting in the background, waiting until some triggering event happens. Triggering event can be as simple as clicking the Run Now button, but it can be in response to various events that happen on the system. And so we're going to explore what some of these triggering events are. And there's an undocumented context variable called trigger type that it'll be good for you to have access to. And so let's explore trigger type a little bit. So we're going to create a new job called Explore. For automation, there are no triggers yet, but we're going to create a trigger. And the most common trigger to use is a repeat on interval, or let's say that's the one that I use all the time. And so, for example, you might want a automation to run every 15 seconds and do some work and then go back to sleep. The actions that we're going to run this time, we're going to use the log event out of our logging section. And this is just going to write something to our event log. And so we're going to do an administrative alert. And the thing that we want to log is trigger type. This is going to tell us that's the visual value that we're displaying in the log. And I'm going to, this will be fun. Let's see if it's going to let me save this. Now I'm not going to be able to work in Campfire. Campfire is an older, we haven't applied all the hotfixes, and the issue that I've run into is that we're auditing for auditing to make sure variables exist, and unfortunately it didn't know about that one. So we're going to have to go to a later version. Give me just a moment. Actually, we'll create a new app with the current version of software. This will take just a minute of delay. Great time to go get a cup of coffee.
Because you're still going to have to run some hot fixes, aren't you?
Probably. Yep.
Yep.
So this just to kind of set expectations, probably about a 5-minute delay, maybe a little less. So while that's loading up, maybe I'll just talk about this a little bit. Have got to keep this moving along. No?
So what was the token that you were?
Sure. Just a second.
Okay. Yeah.
So the trigger type token is a token that gets created when a trigger runs. I'm going to do this from scratch here. So, for example, when you run a one-time trigger, it creates, it has a value of one time. The one that we were starting to use, the repeat interval every 15 seconds, this will have a value of repeat interval. We have other triggers like cron triggers, and so that will have a value of cron trigger. Ones we're going to focus on today, the ones that let all this data audit happen, are the database triggers, and it will have values like if somebody inserts a record, it'll be on DB insert. If a record gets deleted, it'll be on DB update. So the value of this is that we can create one job that will do all of our auditing for all the different DB conditions, but we can know whether it was an insert or an update column or a delete. So that's what trigger type is going to get for us. Let's keep this moving along here. So we have our configuration page. I am just going to take this opportunity to install all of our hotfixes, and that should bring us fully up to date. try the thing that was. See, now instead of being red, it's yellow. It'll let us save this. It knows that it's not recognized, but it's going to let us save this. So this is we're not going to have to do that. So we'll just do the work here. Let me remove these other areas so that there's no confusion about what we're working on. All right. So starting again, we're going to explore automation. So we're going to create our first job. It's going to be in the default namespace, and this is going to be explore automation. The trigger that we wanted to explore was the interval trigger. We were going to go every 15 seconds. And the action we were going to take when that came up was to do a log event. And it's going to be a admin alert that we're going to do. And we're going to say trigger type and output the value of trigger type. So this is going to tell us what type of trigger was running. And so we'll save and close this and take a look at what it does. We can see the job has never been run, but it's going to run here shortly. We'll wait for it to run, and it succeeded because 15 seconds have gone by. If I go to updates and take a look at the logs, take a look at the admin alerts, we can see that the trigger type value that we did was repeat interval. It automatically had the trigger that ran was the repeat interval trigger. If we go back to our job and again continue exploring, I'm going to do one other one since we have already burned up some time here. I'm going to do the cron trigger. We don't talk about the cron trigger very much, so I am going to disable our 15-second trigger and add another trigger of type time cron. And cron triggers have a special syntax. And I'll just point out that you can learn about the syntax by looking at the help text, and it says the cron expression syntax. It has a link to it, and you can click on that and it will explain the syntax. It has to do with setting values for minutes, seconds, hours, day of month, and it's nice because you can get very complex examples, like to run on the final Thursday of the of every February once a year. You can express very specific things, and so, for example, this one that I'm doing here is going to run every 19 seconds. We could do that with an interval trigger, but you can express very complex expressions. So if I save and close that, and Patrick has provided the link to that on the chat. If we now take a look at this, it says it's going to run. So it's running. It ran at 45, and then it's going to run at 57, and we'll see it run some again at 57, and then yeah. So now we have it running theory every 19 seconds. If we look at the logs for that, we have to refresh and come back here to the logs. We can see that the trigger type, instead of saying, oh, we're getting we have both running, so I must not have gotten it disabled. So we have the cron trigger running. Every time the same job is running at different times, and the trigger type is different for each one, and that really illustrates the point that I was trying to make. So let's get all these turned off. So if we look at our triggers, I had left both of them on, and that's why we're getting output from both of them. So I'm just going to disable all of them so we don't get any more. But the main takeaway is that this variable trigger type comes from the type of trigger that's running. And this is a minimally documented feature. So I wanted you to be aware that it existed so that we can go on and use it in our job today. Okay. The as I mentioned, the ones for database that when we use database triggers, they're going to use things like DB insert or update or delete. And so let's explore those a little bit as well. So we'll add a database trigger that will be on database update. Let's pay attention to the contributions table. That's the one that let's see. I'm sorry, we don't have a table that exists here in our, because we had to go into a new environment. So let's create a table that we can do. So the entity will do movies. And create that. Movies will have a name and a here. That is text. It doesn't really matter what these fields are, but we'll just have a couple, and our display name will be name. So that's a real quick entity that we can work with. So we have our movie database, movie table, and it's created the ability for us to add new movies. So if we now go to automation and continue our exploration, I never did get these triggers turned off. Might be a bug here. I'm sure we fixed it in a later version. I'm going to delete out our triggers. Apparently we couldn't turn off our triggers without with this particular version. All right, so we're going to add a database trigger that's going to run on what? Well, database insert. If we insert a record into movie, this trigger is going to run. We still have our admin alert for trigger type, so this will only run when we insert a record, and then we're going to see what we get out of it. So we'll create a new movie. Not the right year. That's all right. And so if we look at our logs, we have one that's now on DB insert. And so we can tell that it's a special type, the trigger type on DB insert. All right. One more exploration thing, and then we'll go actually do the work here. If you look at the information about the on DB insert, so that's the information highlight, it tells you that there are some things that you can use. There is a row Json data. Let's see if I can copy this. token that's created that has all the information for the row. And so if we want to explore this just a little bit and say the row JSON data, we're going to output that. It may be too big actually to go in the log, but it'll give us a sense of what's in there. So now if we insert another record, and so we'll do first, take a look at the logs. Brush. It's warning us that our output got truncated to 600 to 500 characters. There's only a certain amount of information that can be stored, but if you start to look at the information, you're going to see that this JSON included the column name, the old value, new value. So we have an ID that was null and now is 2, corresponding to this 2 here. We have create by and modified by, modified date. And then we have name. Name was the old value was null, but now it's Star Wars IV. And the release year, it was null, but now it's, and that's where we cut off. But all of our information was available. It just couldn't go into the log. Good. So this automation trigger gives us the ability to get a hold of that data. And so I'm going to turn this trigger off and this whole automation job off, and then we can go on now that we've done some exploring. Well, what are we going to do with it? First, we were going to create a data page just to keep Campfire clean, but since we're not working in Campfire, we don't have to do that. We're going to create an audit entity. The audit entity is going to have some properties like the plant and app ID, the change type, which is going to be the trigger type, some JSON data, another one called modified JSON data, which we'll explain. And I had context here, which was from my explorations, but we're not going to do that. So this audit entity is going to hold what we need for to where we're going to store the data. So let's get that done. Create an entity. It's going to be called audit. And we're going to display it in the menu. It's going to show up on the home page. This is just a demonstration. We don't care where it goes. So the property names we want about PAID, and that's going to be a type integer. And we'll also make that our display name. We want to change type. What kind of change is represented here, and that can be text, no problem. We're going to have JSON data, and this can be a lot of information, so we'll say large text in the same way. Modified JSON data also be large text. So 4 simple properties, and we'll save that. And just so that we can see things at work when we will browse to the front of our site and find audits. So we have movies and audits. We'll go to audits and see the records. And if we're successful at what we're doing, as changes happen to movies, they're going to appear here in audits. So we have movies and audits. All right, so now it's time to actually write our job. The automation job is going to be called audit. Well, now it's going to be called audit movies. And this job is going to do everything necessary to do the audit. And we'll talk about what the settings need to be here as we go along. So new job. be called Audit Movies. It's working on this portal, and we want it to have a, you should always have a user defined. In this case, this is the user who it's going to act on behalf of and get its security from. So regardless of what user makes the change to the data, it's going to have rights to be able to write to the audit table. So I'm going to put my email address here as the user that it's going to work for. And then the triggers that we want to do, we're just going to do all the database triggers. So when a delete happens on movie, we're going to do some work. When a insert happens on movie, same way. All the different things that can happen to movie. And we're just going to do the update. Update column says that it's only fires of a certain column, and you might only want to, you might not want every update. If a field is large and complex and has a table is large and complex and has many fields that maybe that change frequently, and you don't need a record of those, you could be more fine-grained with this. But we're going to do it for database delete, insert, update. So every change to the database is going to get logged. And then the action that we want to do is to create a new audit. So create a new audit in our entities section. The ID we'll talk about in just a second. The change type is going to be actually the same thing as our trigger type. Is the one we've been exploring. The JSON data is the one, all of these create this row JSON data. And then interestingly, the database update creates another one called row modified JSON data. So that's the one that we'll put in the other spot here. This is this, let's see what this does. So we have row data and EAA ID is required, and I'm just going to take a look at, if we look at our logs in a new tab, we're going to see that in addition to, I'm sorry, there's all the point is that on all of these, there is all of the columns from the, in addition to this row JSON data that's getting created, you're always going to get the columns that are updated or deleted or inserted. And so we can just say ID will automatically be in the context, and every plant and app table always has an ID field. So this will work for movies, but it'll also work if we do another type of field, another table. Okay, so we're populating, regardless of what happens, we're populating records. We can save and close. We can just now explore the result to see if this is actually working. So our audits table is empty, and we can come here to movies, and we can edit a movie. And I think this one was actually released in 2009, so we can make that change. And when we look at our audits table and refresh, we now have we got part of what we expected. So we have the onDB update was the trigger type. We have the JSON data for the entire record. And so we can see, if we spot it here, the release year, the old value was 2019, the new value is 2009. So it's telling us a complete picture of this record, what it was before and what it is now. Modified JSON data didn't change, and that I would have expected it to have a value. So we're going to, we'll need to dig into that a little bit more. If we add a new record, and I don't know the year for that, when we refresh this table, we're going to see that we now have an onDB insert event that happened. It is the it has old values of null and new values of whatever the field names are, the field values that we provided are. So it doesn't matter what the table is, the system automatically, this row JSON is capturing what we need. And in the same way, if we delete out a record, if we get rid of the Godfather, somehow this doesn't do. It didn't work, but there's a reason for that. It's because the ID is required, and so I'm going to go back to my the trick we need to do. So let's see why that didn't work. First of all, we have an error message. It says failed to get a value for PAA ID. So that ID was empty because it's a deleted record. So we can explore that. The onDatabase delete provides, in addition to the rows that we were talking about, it also provides something called column name before, the value before a delete. So we can get access to the ID from before it was deleted. So problem we had, ID was empty. We can use the default value of ID. So this says if the ID doesn't exist, we're going to use ID before. So this should fix our delete problem. Go now and delete another movie. We'll get rid of Star Wars. File, see if we fixed our problem. There it is on DB delete. So now we can see that it had things like an old value, the release year old value was 1976, the new value was null. So you see it's changing. The old value of the ID was 2 and it went to null. So that's what a delete looks like. So one more thing we need to clean up, and that would be this modified JSON data. We're not tracking it. Let's see if we can figure out why. So on database insert, there is the token is this modified JSON data. And when we create our new, totally spelled it wrong. It said JSON. All right. So now this will be useful. We can see what the difference is when we make a change. So if we change this from 2009 to 2010, an update, we're not changing the name, we're changing the year. When we look at the audit data, we get the DB update, and all the values are shown here, but over here it's just the ones that change. So the old value of release year was 2009, went to 2010. The last modified date also changed from one date to another. So only 2 things changed, and you get a list of what changed. So now this modified JSON data could help you, for example, focus in on did the thing that what changed, what things do I need to pay attention to. There are sort this backwards by ID so we can. So the newer things are now going to show up on the top. Let's add another movie. Oh. Making this stuff up. So our, just so that you can be aware, when we have a insert or a delete, the modified JSON data is exactly the same as the JSON data, and so you can ignore it, or you could add logic to your automation job to suppress it. It's only this modified JSON data really only has value on the update because it's the subset of only the things that change. But now we've got it all wired up and it's working. And that's one of the things that I was talking about, one of the things that I anticipated that we could do. We still have time, so we'll take that on. There's some things that really should be in this table that are not in the table. So if we look at our audits, this is talking about that we're changing the plant and app ID. It's record number 4. It's change type, and we have the data, but nowhere in here does it say that we're doing movies. And that's because that's not part of the data that comes from this logic, from the trigger. Logic doesn't tell you what table change. So we need to create a place to do that in our entities and change our job to do that. So in our audit, we can change a property that's called table name. And we can put this up here by the ID, doesn't matter, but we'll save that. And then our job will want to populate it. So in order to make this as flexible as possible, I'm going to add an action called that is going to be a create update token, and it's going to add a token called table name, and I'm going to just give it hard-coded movie. And so what this does is as we reuse this job for other tables within plant and app, other entities, we can just change this one spot and so save this. The new this action doesn't reflect that we added table name. And Patrick, I'm going to ask you if you would to take a note. I think that we actually have to, that doesn't happen until a clear cache takes place. So it's automation doesn't seem to recognize when we when an action's definition has been changed. See, there it is now. It's here. Table name is now available to us. So we, if you are working in an action in automation and you don't see you making some changes to the data model, you might have to clear the cache. But now we can, the table name variable created here. So it's table name, and we're so now as we make changes in the future, that the table name be part of the data that's stored, and so all the data for the different audits can be stored all together in one table. You don't have to have different ones. So now we have movie, right? Let's say that we want to monitor changes to the users table, just like we have. Yeah, sure, users. Nope, I'm not going to do that. We'll create a new entity. So let's say we create a client table. Name. That's it. So simple table, 3 fields. So this is called the client table. If we want to take a copy of our automation job, we can just clone this. Call it audit client. Change the table name here. We need to change the table that the trigger is working on. Same thing. Have to clear the cache that it doesn't recognize changes to our entity model. But we'll go to audit client. Change these to be that we're watching client table. Close that. So now when we look at clients, those should also be audited. So we'll find our clients, create a new client. Audit, we have client, we have an insert, we have all of our values. So the audit logic is pretty straightforward. If you decide that you want to add or remove a table from auditing, it's all done in one job. It can all be done in the course of 5 minutes, and it automatically handles the fields. Let's take a look at if we look at I'm going to look at this data in the JSON viewer. Just make it easier to look at. We have address, create by, email, last modified, the name of the company, and you can see the values change. Just to illustrate how flexible this logic is, if we go back and change our entity, we change the client entity, say we make a new field. We're also going to track phone number. It'll just start without making any changes to the job. It will track that automatically. So we'll have a field. Edit. DB update record, and notice in our fields Uh-oh. We do have to change our job. Interesting. The phone field was not part of that. So learning experience here. When data model changes, you'll need to edit your automation job. Not sure if I needed to clear the cache, but I'm going to do that to make sure I don't. And Patrick, could you take a note of this issue? Thank you. So our client has changed. I am going to simply do a save and see if that resolves it. Give you the heads up, we're coming to the end of our webinar. If you have any questions, now would be a great time. All right, so now we're starting to see the phone change. So obviously I hadn't tested that. The changes to the data structure require that the automation job be updated. Behind the scenes, we place a trigger on the database and write some code into the database. When you do a database trigger, it's actually in SQL. So I suspect that code needs to be updated, and it gets updated when you do the automation save. Okay. Good. So if we we did this. We created a new automation, audit something else, and just changed a couple of things, and you're good to go. So we're at questions. I'll just say plans for future episodes. We're capturing this JSON data, and with this, if you had this activated, you would be able to tell when a record gets inserted or deleted or updated, and you can tell the exact state of the record at that time. It's by viewing the data, and so we could add some programmatic things, like we could add view capabilities so that you could search for a particular record ID and see the entire history of that record when it was created, all the changes, and if it was deleted. And so that would be useful. You could see the users that did that, so that there's an exact timeline for your data. So that would be one enhancement, and I definitely plan to get to that. You could use this audit table for processing. So, for example, you could add logic that says, I'm going to look at all the changes, and if the client name is changed by a specific user or was changed by a specific user, you could take action. So if you had audit, for example, audit information in place, and it went on for a year, and you have all these changes, and then you find that there are users that are making changes to the names that shouldn't be making changes to the name, you could add processing to detect that and to take action and maybe set it back to the way it was. So that's so processing, and then restore logic. If a record was deleted and shouldn't have been deleted, you could click a button and restore it back to the state that it was. So lots of different possibilities with future episodes, and we plan to take that on. And I'll give it just a couple seconds more for questions, but if anybody has any questions. And Patrick, is there anything that you can think of that I should have addressed and missed?
No, I like this plan.
If there are any questions that come up after the fact, do join us on Campfire 2 days from now, Friday, 10 a.m. Central Time. We will we'll certainly put this on the table for additional discussion, that together with the unscripted nature of Campfire. Who knows where else it will go, but we'll talk some more about this method and perhaps any shortfalls that any directions that people might want to go with that. So with that, we will say happy low coding. We will see you again for our next live webinar in 2 weeks or in Campfire in 2 days. Thanks, everyone.